Immortals of Aveum. I'm guessing by the sales figures, you haven't played it, but you definitely should. Immortals of Aveum is a magic-based first-person shooter developed by Ascendant Studios, a new studio headed by former Dead Space creative director Brett Robbins, and a collection of former EA and Activision developers. It was published under the EA Originals line, which is designed to support independent projects, a fact that's hard to miss when booting up the game. Releasing for all current-gen platforms barring the Switch in August of 2023. This is what so many have asked for. An original, story-driven, single-player game, polished to a shine with great visuals, better performance, and engaging gameplay. Developed by a new studio filled with tons of talent. There aren't any microtransactions, loot boxes, or season passes. No, you actually get a complete, fully featured game right off the bat. With how much we complain about things like the constant conveyor belt of sequels, remasters, and remakes, predatory monetization practices, and shoddy launch performance, we sure don't reward companies who buck the trend. By any measure, Immortals of Aveum should have been celebrated and rewarded with gangbuster sales. The reviews were decent, sitting in the 7 out of 10 range, but the sales were about as good as a wet bag of turds, leading to Ascendant Studios laying off nearly half of their staff. But why? Well, after doing absolutely everything and completing this game 100%, I have a few thoughts, but I'm not bearing the lead here. You should absolutely play Immortals of Aveum, and here's why. To my surprise, one of the best shooters in the past few years doesn't have a single gun. You'll spend your time traversing the magic-filled world of Aveum, blasting fools in the face with your pew-pew hands, exploring, puzzle solving, and gaining new skills as you fight to turn the tides of the Everwar. Sigils replace guns, allowing you to fire 3 types of magic, identified by their color. You have a slew of offensive, defensive, and traversal spells and abilities, most set on a cooldown, that add a lot of variety and dynamism to the moment-to-moment gameplay, which remains a ton of fun throughout the 25-hour runtime. I've heard the game referred to as Call of Duty with magic, and yeah, while it definitely plays like an FPS with hand sparklers instead of guns, it doesn't play anything like Call of Duty. There are no iron sights, regenerating health, or a focus on loadouts. You won't hear constant military chatter, there's no multiplayer, and you don't press X to pay respects. No, Immortals of Aveum feels more like Halo, Doom, and Heretic had a baby, and that baby wants you to get over here.
Get over here!
Fatality.
Was secured. The Sky Islands.
Careful.
Unaware the Everwar
I'm being
approached
careful.
With winged
As careful as last time.
Careful. And the wound
That's not a word.
You play as Jack, a lovable street rat. Jack, along with his fellow rats, do what you'd expect, a bit of thievery, mischief, and snacks. The group has a good dynamic, but don't get too attached to them. Not long after we meet them, they, go off to live on a farm upstate after Sandrak attacks. This event not only reveals Jack's hidden magic powers, but introduces us to General Kirkin, voiced by Gina Torres, and the pretty astounding motion capture work. She serves as a mentor for Jack as he joins the military to fight back against Sandrak's invasion. There's a rich lore surrounding Aveum, where magic is a part of everyday life. Jack's fish-out-of-water character helps to acquaint us with this strange world, with hundreds of generations of history. The overall tone reminds me quite a bit of a Marvel movie, where the world-ending stakes serve as a backdrop to the action and characters, who always seem to have a one-liner locked and loaded for every situation, even the really dire ones.
Do I have to close my eyes or something?
No, not at all.
I found myself put off at first when characters in this fantasy world would use current slang.
The really short version, don't fuck up in there or you'll...
Like, for real?
Other games have tried this to varying degrees of success.
I just move shit with my freaking mind!
And while this never completely clicked for me, I found myself really liking the characters by the end. General Kirkin serves as the anchor, doling out the stakes and keeping Jack grounded. Zendara, Jack's field commander, the beefy silent type who doesn't put up with his shit. Devin, the sharp-tongued master of green magic who grew up with a silver spoon and is fascinated by Jack's street, rattiness. And then there's Jack, a triarch, a very rare spellcaster who can wield all 3 colors of magic. Yeah, the hero's special. I'm shocked too. He starts out as unserious and hot-headed, but becomes the key to victory by the end. The cast, when at their best, have such good camaraderie that I left the game digging almost every one of them, even the side characters you only see in the Pathalon, which is the central hub. The lighthearted approach to the storytelling kept everything from being overly dramatic and dour, which seems to be exceedingly rare these days. Don't get me wrong, there's big, world-ending stakes, and they get serious when needed, but it isn't the focus. Though, what I dug the most was the gameplay.
You're gonna need to learn how to ride a Layla.
Almost everything feels familiar, from the combat to traversal and puzzle solving. Hell, even ziplining around the world is something you've seen before. However, the way everything comes together never feels wholly redundant. The red, blue, and green magic is actually called red, blue, and green magic. Yeah, and most of what's on offer is color-coded for your convenience. Unless you're colorblind, in which case,
You're gonna have a bad time.
actually not really. The developers put in tons of accessibility options, so you're good to go. Each of your different colored sigils acts like a different type of gun. Red is effective at short range, similar to a shotgun. Blue is more precise at range, like a rifle. And green is like a rapid-fire submachine gun. Your shooty fingers have recoil and even need to be reloaded. The shooting feels surprisingly punchy with satisfying impacts, but that's not all. You'll gain the ability to use 5 types of spells: Strike, Fury, Control, Augment, and Dominion. Strike spells are your primary attacks and are determined by the type of sigil you have equipped. Each magic type has 3 different strike spells, but you can only use 1 at a time. Fury spells are your heavy attack, and each magic type has 2 Fury spells. Unlike strike spells, Furies drain the Fury mana bar, which can be panic-inducing in the heat of a fight. You can refill it with mana crystals found throughout the world. Control spells allow you to manipulate the environment. Each magic type has 1 control spell, which you'll use to quickly traverse the environment, slow down or stun enemies, or solve puzzles. Augment spells enhance your playstyle, like how the shield spell can be used for defense, while blink and hover can be used for evasion. Lastly, the Dominion spell is your ultimate attack, combining all 3 magic types to absolutely wreck enemies. You upgrade your spells and add new ones through the talent trees. There are over 80 talents grouped by magic type. As you defeat enemies, complete various challenges, or find artifacts, you'll gain ascension points that you can use to unlock new talents. And what's cool is you aren't locked into what you unlocked. You're encouraged to experiment by reallocating talents at any time for a cost, so you can really play around with what works for your playstyle. And that experimentation and flexibility extends to the gear you'll come across and equip as you explore the world. From new sigils to change your primary attacks, totems to control spells, rings to boost your spell stats like magic power and damage, and bracers, which are gauntlets that act as armor, decreasing damage. At the Forge, you can upgrade your existing gear, destroy gear for its core components, or use components to create new gear. Like your mom, I didn't like how simple it all is at first. From the color coding of magic to the limited types of gear, and even the directed nature of the mission design. However, I grew to appreciate the elegance of its simplicity. You know, like your mom. Enemies are weakest against their corresponding colored magic. You get familiar with each piece of gear and how to use them. You know how to deviate from the story paths without forgetting what you need to do next. The depth isn't in the core, but in how everything works together to create engaging moments and an overall satisfying loop. Your focus isn't pulled away from the action to remember how something works. which is key when there's dozens of different enemy types swarming you at once with varying weaknesses, attack patterns, and tactics needed to best them. Immortals of Aveum nails the most important aspect of combat, which is that it's fun. You can't just hunker down and shoot behind cover. You're constantly moving, jumping, changing up your shots and spells to match enemy weaknesses, waiting for cooldowns amidst the magic fireworks spectacle of it all. And at times, maybe too much spectacle. Combat has a sense of weight and impact, where enemies go flying as they trash talk your mob. Or so I assume. I recommend playing around with the sigils and talents to dial things in like you want. New sigils can change up the combat feel in satisfying and surprising ways. Like how your red magic can turn into a missile launcher, or blue can become a javelin that's hard to pull off in the heat of battle, but so satisfying when you do. At times, everything, including the magical kitchen sink, is thrown your way, and the bosses force you to learn their patterns to take them out. You can grind for materials and experience to max out your talent tree, and that will definitely help, but you'll have to get familiar with all of the mechanics to confidently take on the tougher challenges. In many ways, this feels much more like an old-school shooter with a new coat of paint, where the difficulty curve starts easy enough and ends punishing, which I appreciated, but others may not. The world also has that older feel, for good and bad. Early on, traversing the world is fairly bland, and definitely not a highlight. You'll travel to a bunch of different locations that, while detailed and beautiful, feel fairly grounded, with villages, forests, mountains, and the like. Things get more and more fantastical as you progress, with strange floating islands, curious plants, and breathtaking vistas. You'll want to get lost in the world of Aveum, but each area is mostly linear with a quest icon always pointing you towards your goal. Now the spaces will reveal themselves as you gain new abilities, giving subtle Metroidvania vibes. Like a double jump letting you reach higher ledges, then a triple jump with a lengthy hover opening up distance, or the lash letting you pull yourself up to otherwise impossible to reach areas. The explorability really opens up where you can reach all of these areas you assumed you fully explored, but only just scratched the surface. You can revisit previous areas through these portals, which combined with all of your new abilities makes getting around this world a blast. There are 30 special portals spread across Aveum that take you to Shroud and Shatterfanes, containing tough traversal or combat challenges. These can feel punishing, with tons of incredibly strong enemies that swarm you, and while any of them are doable as soon as you come across them, if you ever really get stuck, you can try again later when you're leveled up and have more skills at your disposal. I recommend you don't skip them since the rewards are always worth the time, like permanent boosts to your stats. While not as filled as, say, Immortals Phoenix Rising, there are tons of puzzles in Immortals of Aveum, usually requiring you shoot colored locks with, wait for it, colored magic. Again, the concepts are easy enough to understand, but I often found a few really tough to figure out. Pro tip: don't overthink these. If you're ever really struggling with a puzzle, you're probably doing something wrong. At times, I'd try some complicated shot again and again, only to realize the truth of my life.
Failure! Failure! You're still a failure! Failure! I can smell the failure!
After figuring it out, the solution was way more obvious and simple than I assumed. Animate seems promising with the power to manipulate objects to solve traversal puzzles, but you'll only use it in very specific circumstances, never fully realizing its potential. And that goes for the world at large. The lore and the characters are solid. Each environment looks different, but other than a few specific areas, they don't play differently. And after killing the enemies in an area, and the sounds of the combat dies down, the areas feel really lifeless. Other than a few sparse areas, you won't see other humans or even animals living in the world. So while they can be interesting to explore for loot and other secrets, they tend to feel somewhat like a wax museum, beautiful to look at, but ultimately lifeless. Now, that isn't to discount the beauty. This is a very pretty game, if a bit safe in its art direction. Unreal Engine 5 is putting in some serious overtime here with tons of details everywhere. from gorgeous vistas to towering structures, and a deep volcano that almost makes you feel the heat emanating from the bubbling lava. And with so much going on, from hordes of monsters to bursts of particle effects and environmental details, the frame rate remains rock solid, which isn't exactly common these days. This is definitely a top-tier visual spectacle. Lots of colors, exceptional particle effects, jaw-dropping views, great detail in the environments, and stable performance make for an experience that feels premium, if not AAA. And the characters also have a lot of touches in their facial animations that convey deeper emotions. For the most part.
With Sandrak for what he did to your home.
But
don't, well, you know.
You could just about feel everything going on, like how you smash open crates, to how you crush mana cubes. Again, it calls to Doom Guy's over-the-top approach to even the smallest actions. Hell yeah. The sound design is also incredible, filled with a mix of punchy hits and magical blasts for the weapons, which is a big step up from the pew-pew sounds when we all essentially played this game as kids pretending to shoot magic from our fingers. Everything, from grunts and yells from the enemies to the booming, unearthly explosions your abilities produce, is all crisp with decent audio separation. The music is a mix of pumping bass-heavy rhythms during the more chaotic moments to minimalistic, ethereal strings and pads when things calm down. The dynamic music knows when to amp things up to heighten the action or chill things out when exploring. And the voice acting is freaking great, with solid natural performances from all the cast, with Gina Torres as the clear standout.
But without magic.
We can't win the war to control magic. Correct.
The game's not all that long. At normal difficulty, you can go from opening to closing credits in about 10 to 15 hours, though full completion will take about twice as long. The completion process is relatively straightforward. You can drop the difficulty at any time. However, if you do, you'll miss out on one of the trophies for that run. Otherwise, you'll have to max out Jack's stats, find artifacts, and upgrade his gear. So as long as you thoroughly explore each area, this should be no problem. This is one of those games that gets better the more you play. Growing Jack's abilities and getting the best gear has such a noticeable effect on the gameplay that it's consistently satisfying even when grinding. I had a great time completing Immortals of Aveum. Was it perfect? No. The lifeless world mixed with the spikes in difficulty may not click for everyone, but the rest of the game shows a lot of care went into creating a package that's beautiful and consistently rewarding. The game was released against Starfield and Armored Core 6, so it was always going to be an uphill battle. Immortals of Aveum won't change your life, but I'll take a new single-player game with an original story, great visuals, and better gameplay every day of the week over yet another quadruple A Ubisoft slot machine. Okay, there are my thoughts on Immortals of Aveum, and I'd love to hear yours as well. If you liked the video, hit like and of course subscribe, and if you want another game that you haven't played, check out my video right here. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.